Hi my wonderful Wyrdlings, welcome to the channel. This is Beyond Authentic, where we go beyond the mundane to tell you all about authentic witchcraft. My name is Lisa, and in today's video I thought it'd be really interesting to go through my two current favourite tarot decks. We've got the Radiant Rider Waite deck versus the Connolly deck. So if you want to see me flip through the major arcana of both of these decks, stay tuned. So then I've already pulled these two, so we'll talk about the Fool first. It is obviously the first card of the deck. It's the Fool's journey that we go on, and yeah, this is quite a clear image change between the two decks. Now I've got to say, if you can hear the dog chewing a bone, I do apologise, but I'm filming this in the lounge and we've got fur babies, so you know. Anyway, so then the Fool, let's look at this. So you can see the character is kind of quite sort of dainty really, holding this flower. There's a knapsack with their belongings in. Obviously this being the Radiant deck, you've got the sun in the background with this wonderful glow on it, which I really like. I think it's a really bright card. You've got the dog, but the one thing with this card is it's unclear as to where the Fool is. It almost looks like they're going to walk straight off a cliff in a mountain range, so it's actually kind of more playing up the Fool as foolish rather than a journeyer or somebody sort of searching. Whereas on the Connolly deck, you can see sort of, again, dressed quite similarly, not carrying the flower quite as daintily, but there is still the flower there. The dog's still there, although this one's got a sort of mark on its eye, so it looks like a different breed. It's a terrier breed or something, but this one is obviously on a crossroads, and this is kind of a key thing for the card. The card is all about starting a journey, going on new paths, new adventures, all of this. There is still the mountain range here in the background, so you've still got sort of the similarities, but this looks far more like kind of, you know, the White Cliffs of Dover or something, or like a standard coastline, whereas this looks like a far more exotic mountain range. I really like the Fool. I think it's a really interesting card. Whenever it comes up in a deck, it's always talking about journeys and about sort of travel and, you know, lots of paths to go down. I especially like this one where the Fool is actually looking behind at the path they've already come. I think that's really interesting. Okay then, moving on to the next card. This is the number 1 card, and we've got the two magicians. Now obviously the Rider Waite imagery, this is classic imagery. Again, the colours on this deck have just been punched up a little bit, which is why I like it so much. But you can see you've got the red and the white, which is similar. You've got the infinity symbol, which is obviously similar. You can see there is the wand there, the staff. So all of the tools are here, and then there is this extra. I've always just found that like an interesting sort of choice, really. But you can see the similarities between them. This is just kind of like a modernised version, but it is very, very similar. The one thing I will say is that on the Connolly deck, this is glowing and the hand is glowing, so it's talking about sort of, you know, the things you create. It's talking about creative energy. It's talking about changing your own sort of future, changing your own life. I like the Magician card. I think it's a really interesting card because it is saying that the magic is in your hands. So whatever it is you want out of life, the magic is literally within you. You can use the tools and all of your experience to actually make those changes. But I also like the fact that on the reversal of this, it's talking about duplicitousness and sleight of hand. And this really does sort of show that. It's like, look at this hand. Don't look up here. Look at this hand. And I think that's a really interesting part of the card. But you can see it's very, very similar, all in its iconography. Talking about similar cards, we have the High Priestess. So the High Priestess in the Rider Waite deck is between the two towers, the black and the white tower, the same as the High Priestess on the Connolly deck. It's a little bit clearer that the High Priestess on the Radiant Rider Waite is holding the Torah. It's actually, if I hold it that way up, like, you can actually read those letters a lot clearer than you can on the Connolly deck. Now this character doesn't look quite as aloof as the High Priestess on the Connolly deck does. So this character looks far more sort of that she's just regal, whereas on the Connolly High Priestess, sort of swapping that background out, having her at night, so there's that sort of lunar element to it, having the moon here as well represented. I mean, yeah, the moon's here, but this is far far more a nighttime feel, whereas this just feels like it's almost part of sort of the throne sort of room, the throne area. And I just really like the imagery here. I like the fact that she's holding the Torah, a little less referential maybe than in this one. She looks a bit relaxed, she looks bored, she's looking off to the distance, and there's just kind of a different vibe about it. So yeah, the High Priestess normally represents a person of power, a woman who can be aloof but who is very, very learned, a bit of a boss bitch really. And I like the High Priest energy almost as much as I like this next card, the Empress. I adore the Empress. I've actually got a poster behind me in the tarot room, so whenever you see me filming any of my witchy videos or doing the tarot live, behind me at the moment as part of my backdrop is I have a version of this image from the traditional Rider Waite as a giant poster behind me. I absolutely love the Empress. So the Empress is all about abundance, and this is represented with the wheat. Now, I like the fact that here in the Connolly deck, you've got the wheat, but you've also got all of these flowers, you've got the gold orb. Obviously, there's a gold orb here. So again, although it's the same sort of image, she's still got the crown, she's got the orb. This one just looks a little less friendly to me. I don't know why. She's like, this card just feels... She just feels like if I saw both of these women at a pagan camp, I would probably be friends with this one and get on okay with this one. Does it, you know what I mean? Again, the orb, lots of gold brocade, lots of like cues for abundance in history. Whereas in this one, she just looks like a lot more regal sort of... She looks like a medieval ruler, doesn't she? She really does. Or like a high lady rather than a queen. Okay then, so we've got the Empress. What about the Emperor? Wow, this is one where I think there is a massive difference in the cards. So this one is very red, very fiery, very an older gentleman portraying the Emperor, very much in control, very much sort of, you know, you wouldn't mess with this one. Whereas this Emperor looks a little bit more approachable. I always think it looks a little bit like Walter Koenig, Chekhov from Star Trek. I don't know whether you can see that there. This one where he's holding the globe and he's got sort of the sun setting behind the mountains. I think this looks like a much more approachable sort of emperor, really. Again, there are some flowers there, just softens that emperor's role a little bit. Whereas this one, not only does he look older, but he's obviously wearing sort of armor and he just looks a lot more austere, doesn't he? And that throne is a lot more powerful. So again, the emperor is about a very powerful person, normally male, somebody in authority, somebody who has a lot of decisions to make, an awful lot of control, and somebody who the buck stops. Right, the fifth card in the deck is the Hierophant. Now, again, very, very similar sort of iconography, but also very different. So the Hierophant represents sort of religious dogma. It represents that unflinching, unflexing kind of ideas. It represents kind of, you know, being in something and being firmly, firmly in. This is the ultimate on authority. What the Hierophant says goes. They make all of the decisions. So this is a really important one. Again, with this card, they really leaned into, on the Connolly deck, they've leaned into the Christian iconography by having the dove here and by having the sort of stained glass window in the background. This Hierophant is a little bit less obvious, although there is still the crosses down the front, which is kind of represented here, although that looks more like a fleur-de-lis. But anyway, these two people on the cards are both representative of sort of, you know, the people themselves, the people that the Hierophant has power over. Also sort of the supplicants, the people that go to the Hierophant and ask for questions and ask for blessings. And obviously both these characters, their hands are actually in the blessing pose. So yeah, a really interesting card. Right then, a card that is also very, very similar next, the Lovers. Very similar iconography. Obviously, the Connolly deck, being quite a sort of Christianized deck almost, has the characters with their genitals covered, whereas in this deck, they're sort of slightly more like but they're in the way that Barbie and Ken are. They're sort of there, but not really. Again, very similar imagery, although this one has the apple tree, which is arguably from the Garden of Eden, that forbidden fruit element. And also there is a cherub here, and this angel obviously is representative of this angel. So the lovers, as we all know, is basically the... Oh, I've actually just noticed. This is the first time I've just noticed. There is the apple tree there, look. So it is very similar iconography. But the lovers represents couples, it represents romance, it represents sexuality, it represents coming together of two individuals or a partnership, like a business partnership in a business reading. So it is a very, very, very commonly seen card in a lot of depictions, because it's a really obvious one to tell what the lovers means, isn't it? So not quite as obvious is the next card, which is the Chariot. So again, this is similar iconography. You've got the sort of Egyptian heads there. We've got the wings. We've got the chariot itself. Although the Connolly deck, obviously this one looks like a slightly more... It's slightly more fluid, isn't it? This one actually looks like it could be in movement. The flag is furling. This Chariot card, the background is very much stayed. It's kind of, you know, a comfortable... you know, it's a comfortable vehicle, this one, whereas this Chariot is kind of, it's a Ben-Hur, you know, chariot race vehicle. So Chariot is representative of travel, it's representative of journeys, both inner journey and physical journeys. It's representative of vehicular modes. So there's lots of like iconography here. You can break down like the stars, you know, for the champion and all of that. So there's lots of things that we can talk about with the Chariot. The next card is Strength, and again, there's not an awful lot to talk about with this card, really. It is kind of, it is what it says on the tin. It talks about strength. So it talks about the strength of this character, this in the Rider Waite deck, the Virginal White. Again, we've got to get that clear. In the Connolly deck, she's in yellow. But this is the purity of the soul overcoming the fears and the danger. So obviously the lion either has a bad tooth, which this one depicts, or like a thorn in their paw, which is kind of slightly more this one. And obviously this virginal innocent character comes along and removes either the tooth or removes the thorn and leaves the lion kind of as their friend. The lion then is their guard, their guardian, their protector. But it talks about inner strength, it talks about physical strength. There's a lot of connotations in this card. But again, I really like this one because I like the fact that there is this walled sort of garden area. The infinity symbols, obviously, we've got on both. Whereas this card, although it's nice and bright, it just kind of feels a bit weird. I mean, the shape of the lion is a bit weird, but also like the ground, it's like, well, where is this? Like, are there little sticks of broccoli, or is there supposed to be a tree in the background? It's all a bit flat for me. But anyway, the Hermit. Now, this is a card that I adore in the Connolly deck, because this card, you can actually see the passing of the torch, and that's a key thing on this card. You basically go into hibernation, or you go into sort of solitude. You do some deep thinking. It's talking about sort of, you know, looking back at your own life, your own journey, and looking at the lessons that you've learned, and then passing the torch down, either from your younger self to your older self. In other words, doing the work now that you're going to use in later life, or kind of doing the opposite, passing the wisdom back to your younger self. So I think this is a really, really lovely card, a lovely depiction of the Hermit's meaning, whereas this card is a lot more simple, isn't it? Although you have got the lantern to represent the wisdom of knowledge, and again, this deck is very much on that mountaintop, a bit precarious, whereas this Hermit, you kind of just think, you know, they've gone to a mountaintop and they've kind of been, you know, sitting and meditating and learning and living in a cave, whereas this Hermit could almost just be, you know, on an icy day, just walking out to go and feed the pigs. You know what I mean? It's not quite got that same rich imagery. However, this next deck, this next card, I think I actually prefer the traditional imagery on this one. It's really interesting because the Wheel of Fortune is all about opportunity and risk. It's all about having, you know, an abundance of choice, and sometimes that choice can be overbearing. Sometimes we can take too many risks. But in this deck, I like these images. I really do. Obviously, with this one, we're talking about the tools. So again, we've got those 4 suits and we've got the images of the figures there. But there's just something about this that I really, really like for the Wheel of Fortune. Now, I've got to say I prefer the Connolly version of Justice, because this looks a lot more lifelike. It looks a lot more kind of fluidic, and also just the character here, this is a much more, it's like she's weighing up justice here. She's weighing up the decision, and if you lose, she's going to chop your head off. Now, I know that this deck's justice is very similar. She's also holding the sword and the scales of justice. It just doesn't feel as threatening. It's almost like this is ceremonial, whereas this justice, she'll carry out, you know, she is judge, jury, and executioner. She really is. Whereas this one feels almost just like the judge. You know what I mean? It's like she'll pass judgment and somebody else will actually do the deed. Whereas in this version, you know she's going to swing that sword and decapitate you. The Hanged Man, I am really torn. I like this a lot because of its brightness. I think this is kind of a little bit dull on the printing, but you know. But this Hanged Man, I appreciate the fact that the rope is depicted here. So this Hangman, the Hangman represents Odin on the Tree of Life, the Yggdrasil, where he was given the runes. And that's what I like about this sort of Celtic knotwork. This is almost runic kind of here. And I like the fact that we've got the cherub, which represents sort of, again, knowledge and innocence and all of these things. But the rope here is definitely not tied. So this Hanged Man is there by choice. That isn't quite as clear on this one. I mean, they've both got the same sort of smile there, look. So they've both got this same half grin, that very sort of Mona Lisa half grin. It just feels, though, that this one is here much more by choice, whereas this one, kind of, that isn't really quite as clear. Now, the next card, we see the biggest change so far. Now, in the Rider Waite and in all of the traditional decks, we have the Death card as number 13. So there's various depictions of this. Normally, it is the Grim Reaper, and this one's on his white horse with a charger, and you've got sort of dead people here. And the imagery here is very clearly about death. Now, the card never means death. It always means transition or transformation. It always means the end of one period of your life and the beginning of another one. However, when this card comes up in readings, this is the card that most people will remember, and they'll be like, oh, the death card appeared. I don't remember why, but oh, because they think it denotes a death, which is why I really like how the Connolly deck have depicted it. This is the same card, number 13. It's just been rebranded as Transition. So it's much clearer here. Look, the character is going from darkness into light, from one phase of their life into another. Arguably, you've got a child here, so childless into, you know, having a family, having children. This darkness into the light over here. There's an awful lot of imagery here which you can talk about, leaving behind the crown, leaving behind your old self and all of the things that you thought you were. So there's a much more sort of metaphysical element on this card, whereas this is just far more, it's the Grim Reaper. So yeah, that's why I like this deck, especially for reading, when I was doing professional readings. When this one pops up, it's a lot less scary, and it's talking about the actual meaning of the card, whereas this one people do get really flummoxed by. Not a card that's going to flummox anyone. Next, we've got Temperance, and this is a really lovely, gentle card. I like both versions of this. I think this one being slightly less angelic, I really like. She's still obviously in white. She's got that sort of angel coding. She's got her third eye open. There's lots of lovely imagery here, but this almost looks like the Temperance figure is something that's happening to us. This feels like something that we're a part of. Does that make sense? So this being an angelic figure, yeah, with the crown and everything, it just feels like we are asking for temperance. We are asking for that patience, that calmness. Whereas in this one, it's almost like we are part of that decision. Whereas in this one, it's almost like, yes, you will be calm. You know what I mean? It just feels a little bit different. It's the same meaning of the card, effectively. It's just that this one, for me, just reads a little bit clearer. Again, another massive change here on the next card. It is number 15, which is the Devil. Except on the Connolly deck, it's materialism. Now, this is really interesting because the Devil card traditionally has the two lovers, so it can represent marriage. It can represent these ties that bind it, or these chains. Again, represents marriage, but it also represents being sort of tied to the material world. This is the physical over the spiritual. That's why the pentagram is reversed. It isn't anything to do with Satanism. However, in modern times, that really has got confused, because this, partly because of this sort of imagery. But the way the pentagram is depicted, if you've got one star up, the top is soul, and then the bottom, the other 4 points of the pentagram are representative of earth. And so this is literally spirit, body over spirit. So this is the focus on the physical over the mental and over the spiritual. Normally the pentagram the other way up means the exact reverse of that. So this whole card is talking about that. It's talking about selling your soul to the devil for financial gain. But it is one of those cards that when the devil comes up, it is really scary for a lot of people, and it's one that they will always remember when this comes up in a reading. However, with materialism, you can see we've got some similar sort of iconography with the chains. We've got the chains, and except this time the chains are fixed to all of these tools. However, again, a bit like the hangman, they're not actually padlocked. So this is the choice of our character here, the querence. This is the choice of this person holding on to these tools, holding on to those materialistic elements. Behind them, you've got the rainbow of wisdom and knowledge, and you've got a figure there representing sort of a slightly more innocent view. But again, it can also represent marriage, because obviously these two people can be getting married, which is one of the meanings here for this sort of traditional depiction of the devil. Okay, a card that's, again, a lot more traditionally depicted. We've got the Tower. So you can see the Tower has been hit by the lightning, and these characters have jumped out. So these little images, I believe, are Hebrew, basically meaning sort of this is God's word, or the word of God. So this card is representative of things you've built up being destroyed. It's the Tower of Babel crashing. It's talking about things not being on a solid foundation and things being shifted. It's about false beliefs and false sort of ideology, really, and false ideology. Whereas this one, it's very, very similar. It's just taken almost from like a different angle. It's almost like a different camera, if you like. So it's like this is a camera from sort of far off, and this one's just got a bit of a more close-up image. I do like both of these cards. This one, however, is just a little bit more muted in its color palette. But, you know, I don't mind that. I do still like it. But it does have that dove there right in the middle. Again, because the Connolly deck is kind of a slightly more Christianized deck, we do have this imagery coming in quite a bit, sort of representing sort of the sort of Christian faith, really, which I don't mind when I'm doing professional readings. Again, you can read into that if you want. You can take that depiction and talk about that when you're doing readings. I choose not to. I choose to just basically see it as a spiritual endeavor, rather than it being sort of pertain to a particular religion. But that's my choice. The next card is quite different as well. We've got the Star. Now, the traditional Rider Waite image has the water barrier. I think that's the sign for Aquarius from the sort of astrological symbols. She's sort of, you know, quite a traditional image, really, with the two jugs of water and the star with the 6-rayed star. You know, there's quite a lot of imagery here. Arguably, we've got the Tree of Life here in the background as well. The star represents sort of success. It represents wishing on a star. The reversal is wishful thinking, and, you know, sort of living in wishes rather than in reality. Now, on this card in the Connolly deck, this character has achieved quite a bit of success, quite a bit of spiritual journeying, and this is far more talking about a spiritual sort of advancement, really. And again, we've got that wishing, we've got that sort of, you know, dreaming, we've got that same sort of ideology, but in this one it's a little less clear that the person is sort of successful in their journey. So this person carries the star as an emblem, has journeyed to the star, and is wearing the star. So it's talking about kind of reaching almost a zenith point of sort of spiritual discovery, if you like, and hope and health and all of those things. So yeah, this is kind of achieving your dreams, and this is still dreaming, is how I would interpret the difference between the two decks. Okay then, so the next card we have the Moon, and again quite a different interpretation of the card. This is a very traditional one with the dog, the jackal I think it is, or the wolf and the scorpion, and the towers. Now in this deck, the Moon is representative of intuition. It's representative of sort of this, got similar imagery really to like the moon gazing hare and things like that. It's representative of intuition without it being sort of spoken out quite as much, and it's talking about kind of, you know, finding your own sort of peace, your own metaphysical journey's end, if you like. Whereas this card, this character, this sort of young girl, represents his unconscious, and he's brought her to this contemplation pool, apparently, where he's able to sort of to sit and think, and then he turns to the moon, and he's made his decisions. Intuitively, he has made those decisions. But you've got the various tools here depicted. So we've got the sword, we've got the wand, we've got the pentacle there engraved onto the stone, and also she's holding the cup. So she's holding his emotions, because the cup represents the emotional suit. So his subconscious and his emotions are all kind of slightly separate to the contemplation and to the decision making that he has to do. So this is very much talking about looking within, looking at your own inner guide and listening to your own voice for the answers, whereas this is a little less clear on that, if that makes sense. Few more cards now, not many left. We've got the sun, again, similar sort of iconography, where we've got the bright rayed sun and we've got the cherub, except in the Connolly deck we've got the 4 cherubs, each holding one of the tools. So we've got the pentacle there, we've got the cup, we've got the wand. We don't actually have a sword, but in place of the sword we've got a rose with its thorns. So it's kind of representative of all of the positive things of life, and the sun gives us life. Without the sun, there is no life on this planet. I've seen quite a few depictions with this horse being a unicorn. I've seen quite a few depictions with the child being sort of, you know, a series of children or whatever. Again, the child represents that new life. It represents that continuation of life on our planet thanks to the sun. So this is a really positive card. It can talk about childbirth or, you know, possible children in the future, but it can also talk about sort of, you know, generic success and happiness and growth in all its forms. Okay, the penultimate card now, we have Judgment. Now in the Rider Waite deck, we've got the sort of traditional end of days imagery. So this is very much, you know, when our time has come and we are called, how are we going to be judged? What are we going to be sort of held up to? What high regards are we going to be held up to? And will we have met those high regards and those high expectations? Whereas this card is talking far more about an inner judgment. This isn't the judgment from above, this is the judgment from within. But in this card we've got the knight in his armor. So again, it's talking about maybe some of the things that we've done in life, some of the wars that we've gone to, the battles that we've gone through. But he's taken off his helmet and he's taken down his sword and his shield, so he's not fighting those battles right now. This is the Book of Judgment, so again this kind of is representative of sort of this more iconography where he is being judged on his deeds, but then you've got sort of his subconscious and his inner child represented there as well. So again, both these cards are saying the same thing. They're talking about judgment, they're talking about, you know, being judged on our actions, on our deeds, on our words, how we treat other people. But this one is far more sort of end of days significance, whereas this one is kind of like the end of a current battle, if that makes sense. And then lastly, we have the world. Now, I've got to say, I like both of these renditions of this card. They're both very, very similar. You've got the character kind of, you know, representing the entire world, although I've got to say the Connolly deck, having her standing kind of above this image of the globe with all of the sort of the nature around her, this gives me Gaia vibes. This really does give me Earth Goddess vibes, whereas in this one it's a little more angelic, and again we've got this similar sort of iconography going around the top. The wreath is very similar to sort of the way that sort of nature is formed here, and she's holding, again here she's holding those 2 wands, whereas here she's just got that one sort of magic spiritual wand. So the world is representative of literally the world is in your hands. You've got so many choices, so much opportunity. You literally can grasp that nettle if you so wish. So there you go. That's both major arcanas. I've got to say the Connolly deck I absolutely love. I've been using a version of this deck for over 20 years now. I think it is absolutely stunning. I love the fact that we don't have a devil or a death card, because those are the cards that always stop a reading sort of dead in its tracks, really, when those 2 cards come up, because people see that and they have all sorts of connotations, even though I will say to them 100 times, this does not mean death, it means something else. they will just see the death card and that's all they think. And they actually think, you know, oh, that means, you know, grandma's going to pop her clogs or the hamster's going to die or whatever. So for that reason, I really like this deck for sort of, you know, public readings and just for people that don't really know an awful lot about tarot. But I've got to say, I've only had the Radiant Rider Waite deck for a few weeks and I absolutely love it. I love how it's got the traditional iconography, but it is just absolutely punched up and made far brighter and far more sort of usable for me. I do get a lot from this deck. Now, I haven't genuinely, historically, got the same sort of connection with the standard Rider Waite. So that's really interesting to me, just how a difference in sort of the saturation of the cards and sort of just slightly the way the cards have been coloured. I really do get a lot more from this. Now, if you have been watching any of my Self-Care Sunday and Tarot Hour live streams on Sunday evening, 7 p.m. UK time here on the YouTubes, I've got to get that plug in. I have been using this deck far more often recently because I have had that sort of really strong connection to these bright colours. But both of these decks I really, really do enjoy. But there you go. If you would like to see me go through the suits, so the cups, the wands, the swords and the pentacles, then do please pop a comment down in the comment section. Tell me what your favourite deck is between these two. Also though, if you have another deck that you enjoy, let me know that in the comment section as well, and I can always have a look at that in a future video. But that is it from me today. Don't forget, if you've liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and click your bell icon if you haven't already, so that YouTube will notify you each and every time I upload a video. Don't forget, check out down in the description box, we've got the Authentic Army links. It's a group of small creators here on YouTube. We keep it 100% real and tell it as it is without worrying about any PR lists or anything like that. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then do make sure you check those out. But that is it from me today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. A little bit different because I'm not actually on camera, although I kind of am. But there you go. That's it from me. And all that's left to say is stay you, stay weird, stay authentic, and I will definitely see you next time. Bye-bye.